On this episode of the show, I have with me Moiz Kohari. He is the VP of Enterprise AI and Data Intelligence at DDN, and we're going to be talking about operationalizing AI solutions. We'll talk a little bit about the differences between GenAI and AI and some of the challenges around implementing and delivering value and defining that value, and maybe a little bit of data architecture stuff in there. We got a lot to cover with you, Moiz, but I appreciate you taking the time.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Before we start, can you tell us all what DDN does?
Yeah, DDN provides a data platform. The roots are in high performance computing, where 74% of the supercomputers on the planet actually run on DDN storage capabilities. The pivot has been leveraging those capabilities for AI. As you can imagine, AI is highly dependent on data, and how you deliver that data and the velocity of that data matters, because if you're leveraging very expensive equipment like GPUs and other things like that, if these things are not running at its full capacity, you're really wasting time and money, and that's where the DDN comes in.
Absolutely. I guess this episode we're going to talk a little bit about where we're at with things, especially when it comes to operationalizing AI. And I know a lot has been made about the MIT study of project failure rates. And I guess when we think about AI, I mean, AI has been at some level in existence for a long time. This is not new, right? So obviously it's been, GenAI now might have been brought to the limelight with a few tools that people are just, in their daily lives are more comfortable. I guess let's start off talking about that, right? So I'm sure the audience knows AI and GenAI is not the same, but when we think about the enterprise and we think about stakeholders, is that an easy line for enterprise stakeholders to understand?
I believe it is, because, look, if you're leveraging AI, and let's define what AI ends up being, right? ChatGPT certainly had that aha moment from an AI perspective, but like you said, we've been working on, and I personally have worked on neural networks for, 40 years ago I was doing some of this work. So this is nothing new. However, GPT, how it leverages language processing and provides that interaction with the public, right, has brought AI into the limelight. I ran technology for the London Stock Exchange many years ago. This is more than 10, 12 years ago. And we deployed a market surveillance system that was based on machine learning and AI. So, the capabilities have been there. I was in a similar role at State Street Bank, and we leveraged and deployed AI-based systems, in our environment 10 years ago. So it's been there. However, today, with how Gen AI is being leveraged, and I think you and I want to dive into that, the question really ends up being, how can I operationalize it, and what are the problems that I may run into? Because I believe that the MIT study, where they list that a high number of projects are failing or not going into production, it is really based around how can you take the human out of the loop so you can see full benefits of deploying an AI-based system. And if you don't take the human completely out of the loop, then the companies still have that line item on their expenses. So that's really where the interesting parts come in.
Absolutely. And I mean, that report, I think it's an interesting discussion. I've had a chance to go through it. I think it's very interesting because the way it was articulated, and talked about, generative AI pilots. When I think about that, I don't know how many organizations, I don't know, maybe I'm going to be wrong, you can correct me, but I don't know how many organizations have really gone through successful piloting of generative AI into deployment and being used by some decent number of stakeholders, so they've seen it scale. I have been hearing and speaking to tons of leaders saying, "Hey, we're building muscle memory. We're trying. We're just tinkering." And I don't know in that survey how much of that piloting, quote unquote, is factored into that muscle memory and tinkering that people have been doing.
Yeah, look, and part of the tinkering is also people are leveraging different platforms to do coding that's, what people may call vibe coding, right? It's really being leveraged across the board, and I'd say many folks are deploying systems based on code that is being generated for them. The interesting part there ends up being, do you understand what you're deploying, and can you support that appropriately with or without the GenAI systems that assisted you in creating that? So that's one thing. But if you think about the platform and how people may be leveraging it, whether it's for coding or whether it's for research purposes, right? In the past, you and I may have used whatever, right? Go to library or use Yahoo and Google to do research. Well, today you can get, all kinds of research that these platforms can help you with. Takes your intelligence to leverage that research and deliver something that's competent and interesting for your stakeholders, but that research is being accelerated. My team and I, in the past, where we were trying to deploy systems to do certain types of things, and let's just say installation of a cluster and deploying that cluster with certain types of packages could take you weeks to really pull it together. Well, today you can literally do that in an hour, right? So the productivity boom is absolutely insane and very exciting. How and where humans continue to add value is the area that needs to continually evolve. And I do believe in that. I don't think the machines fully replace us. However, I do believe that we have to make ourselves more pertinent. And it requires, the thought leadership there.
Yeah, I love that. And I do wonder, when we look at these technology solutions that are actually, I think, helping AI solutions that are helping most of the market. Obviously, tools that are built, for whatever coding productivity tool out there that you're using, engineers are building these tools for workflow they understand very well, and you can see there's an uplift. I mean, people are, to what degree they're successful with it and how they're using it, that can all be debatable, but it is it is something we can define value against, right? Like, we can see productivity. When it comes to other areas of the business and you look at technology delivering value, when do you start thinking we're going to start seeing similar uplifts? Because obviously technologies are accelerating development of technology. Like, we're getting more out quicker. Hopefully that means we have some time to address some critical issues out with our stakeholders.
So I'll bring your attention to a paper that OpenAI had published September 3rd. And in that paper, they really discuss hallucinations and how it is really a feature, if you will, of the product. And part of that is because most of these GenAI systems were built to not say, I don't know. They're rated on the fact that they come back with an answer. And that answer may or may not be accurate, and that's what we call hallucinations, right? So how you can deploy these systems in a way such that you can leverage the information coming out of them and trust that information, I think that's the next frontier. So data, as we were discussing, right? Data is absolutely critical, because the more data you can train these systems on, the more supposedly knowledge you are, inheriting. However, if you are not able to satisfy a query completely, your system's ability to suggest that you don't know and it requires manual intervention of some sort is absolutely critical. That's the part that doesn't exist. And in my humble opinion, many of the projects may be coming to a standstill because of that. You can imagine, like I come from finance, you can imagine if there is a regulatory framework that you're working with and you need to report certain things, well, unless you're 100% positive that you're reporting the right stuff, you don't want to report something because the regulators don't want to go through that and figure out that you don't know what you're talking about. So that's a major problem. So how do you create those, what I termed in one of my papers was behaviorally calibrated systems is a really key area of research and interest for some of us to see how we bring these systems to the market.
Absolutely. I guess when we're talking about, IT teams, we're talking about, technology teams, we want to accelerate delivery. We want to get things out in the hands of the stakeholders faster. We're leveraging all these tools in the last 20, 30 years to make technology, I don't know if easier is the right word, but facilitate delivery, right? And when you think about your role in trying to accelerate that delivery, where does your team, I guess, what does your team do at that time, right? So if we are delivering faster, have we figured out what we're going to do at that time? Or is it the fact that we're just going to get more done? Or is it we have more time to spend with the stakeholders? I mean, if we are actually seeing, let's say, delivery accelerated, what does that mean for actual technology teams?
Look, I think for the time being, at least, we don't have a shortage of things to do, right? There's always more to do. So if you can deliver things much quicker, you have more time to handle more complicated things, right? So if I can deploy a 1,000-node cluster with a touch of a few buttons, well, now how do I leverage them? I get into that, and how I drive intelligence from that is really the interesting part. So I'll give you one example. My team has been working on what's in it, AI pipeline, okay? And this AI pipeline in specific, we're targeting at how we can identify drug discovery from a life sciences perspective or accelerate financial services pipelines, let's say for risk analytics or different types of high frequency trading, quantitative analytics, right? Now, traditionally, you would be bringing in this data, you would, go through some models, crunch that data. And if you're crunching that data, right, normal processes require hours of data crunching or compute time, okay? So that's why most financial institutions, every single large broker-dealer has to go through it, and they do end-of-day processing. And then they report that back to the regulators, right? The reason they do end-of-day processing is because if the calculations take a certain amount of time, 3 hours to crunch through, right? I can't do that in the middle of the day while the trades are happening, right? So I do it at the end of the day, and I hopefully get it all done before the next morning my traders are going to hit the desk. Now, when you talk about acceleration, and by the way, we do work very closely with NVIDIA on this. NVIDIA has, these GPU accelerated models. They're providing you with all kinds of libraries, NIMs and NEMOs and things like that to help you take that workload and accelerate it, okay? We're able to do literally billions of different calculations where we're taking billions of paths and scenarios and running through that in literally minutes, 2 minutes, to deliver 100 billion different paths, which normally speaking on a CPU infrastructure would take me hours to do. Now, to your point, well, okay, great, Moiz, you got that done in 2 minutes. So how does that impact me? Well, the way that impacts you is now instead of thinking about it and doing end of day processing, I can actually do that intraday. So let's say at 9 a.m., some event happens, and I'm waiting till end of day to process and do margin calls and portfolio analysis, right? I am exposed for that entire day. And that can potentially be a Lehman moment. You don't know. So intraday, if I'm able to do these calculations on a minute by minute basis, and as events happen, if there is a tweet that comes out that is important, or something happens somewhere on the planet and that's important, I'm able to do portfolio analysis and do margin calls and make sure that there is no counterparty default that could potentially exist. You didn't take my attention away. You didn't replace me. What you did was now you're providing a way to give better intelligence and better signals to the business, which is really what we all want to do.
I love that. I think that's very well said. And when you're thinking about, obviously you're trying to generate that value and you're trying to deliver it. I mean, every enterprise is trying to achieve the same. When we're talking about defining what that value is in the age of AI, can we use things that we traditionally have in the past? Is it a little bit different when we're talking about value and AI?
Well, define value, right? I mean, I think you're saying that. And value definition is really based on the business that you're running. So value definition in finance might be that I'm minimizing risk that I'm carrying, or I am finding alpha faster than I would otherwise, right? And that I'm making money. So great. In other areas, such as life sciences, value definition would be that my ability to identify certain molecules that can bind to certain proteins which give me better results, and how quickly can I do that. Traditionally speaking, if I was using high performance computing infrastructure and I was crunching through these things, and it would take me literally months to get to those types of results, if I'm able to deliver those results as quickly as possible, meaning minutes or maybe days, the value is human life. I have the ability to save human lives. So if you look at some of the largest research hospitals out there, the Mayo Clinics and the St. Jude's of the world, MD Anderson, they have unlimited amounts of data. They're trying to get value out of that data, right? So they're trying to save lives. The problem ends up being that most of that data is sitting behind some type of a silo, and the researchers may or may not be able to leverage that data appropriately. So there was another paper I wrote on this subject. It's called Federated AI. How you deliver federation capabilities within these AI systems so you can provide all of the pertinent data to all the researchers without exposing any personal information, or PII or PHI or any other type of information, is critical. If you can create a data architecture that helps you support that and deliver value that way, the value you're delivering is you're literally going to be able to save hundreds and millions of lives instead of waiting for 2 years to be able to bring a particular drug to the market because you don't know what you don't know. So I think value creation and value delivery is absolutely being accelerated by the systems that we're developing and leveraging.
Absolutely. I love that. I guess when we think about the data architecture that you need to deliver value, right? In the last 20 years, obviously we've gone through various iterations of data technology. When we talk about AI, and we look back in the 20 years, obviously now people are in a rush to address some of those architectural issues, but I guess you could have, but how many people would have maybe 20 years ago thought, hey, I need to I need to do X, Y, and Z to make sure that I'm always a step ahead, which is something that data struggles with. But I guess, what are your thoughts around data architecture, AI readiness, and how far back do you look and go, darn, we missed an opportunity to be even more ready to take advantage of the data we have?
I'd suggest that instead of thinking about what we may have missed, what should we do and what needs to be done? That's the way I look at it, and my teams operate in that manner. So I would suggest that data architecture is one of the most critical things you need to do for any AI system to be able to help you, because any AI system is dependent on the data that it's operating on for either training purposes or for inference purposes, right? When you're inferencing, you're basically looking at real-time things and saying, what should I do next, right? So that architecture is very, very critical. Now, your point, right? There are two different types of architectures that we can discuss, right? One is the whole file-based POSIX data architecture, where data sits in these large file systems, and you go fetch data, leveraging POSIX semantics. And the other is really what was produced by the cloud vendors, blob storage, or Amazon S3 made it extremely pertinent in the world today for object storage. Both of these are giving you data, right? Now, I may have written an application that was 20 years old. It was written with POSIX semantics, and I may want to apply those same, without needing to change the application, I may want to allow that application to leverage data that's sitting in an object store, S3. How do I do that? So there are a few platforms, DDN being one of the premier ones out there, that give you the ability to actually store data in object format and still be able to leverage it in POSIX format. So what does that mean? It means that my legacy applications are able to leverage data in any format that it's sitting out there, and now I have access to more information, which usually should mean that I have better intelligence coming out of it. And how you're applying your models on top of that, and your models are able to grab that data and process it, and then basically either whether it's ETL processing or it's for inference purposes, you're processing that data velocity really matters. Your traditional systems, if you're looking at what's reported by NVIDIA and others, your traditional systems end up having the GPUs be utilized or sit idle at approximately 30%. So the GPU utilization is sitting at 70%. The biggest problem there, and Jensen himself has stated this, is how that data is being fed to the GPU, because the bottleneck ends up being IO bound. So if you have the ability to provide that information to the GPUs, which GPU is normally your biggest line item as far as your expense is concerned, if you're able to make sure that those GPUs are operating at 90+% utilization, you're actually saving money for your company. So how do you do that? It's all in the data architecture. You need to really very carefully think about how that data is being presented, how it's being preserved, how you can provide it to applications with certain role-based access controls and identities incorporated into it, so you know that the people who are leveraging your information are people who are allowed to leverage it, and anyone else is not able to leverage it, right? And this also starts to bring us into the whole post-quantum cryptography and how you make sure that current cryptographic methods are evolving appropriately so that your architecture is being created for tomorrow, not just for today.
Love it. I guess Maybe a different question before we wrap up. If you were to look at your view and experience with AI, and you're looking for opportunities within organizations, right? Are there areas that potentially just align better and could lead to success? Obviously, we talked about the failure rate. So what can we do? Where can we look to potentially move the needle and go, you know what? Those things just might be too hard if you don't have that muscle memory, or you don't have that, you're not that far along in the maturity curve. Are there areas you could be looking at?
I mean, honestly, I think that every single area is prime for disruption and innovation. So the question really ends up being, how can we ensure that when you're starting off on a project, you are able to provide milestone-based delivery such that your board has confidence that you're not wasting money and this is not just a research project, you're actually delivering something. Again, I would suggest that in order to find those opportunities, right, you can look at pretty much any process that you have, okay, and how automating that process, what impact would it have? And any given process is always going to require some amount of data, so that data architecture comes into play, and then leveraging the right types of tools to be able to accelerate that process and make sure that you have all the regulatory oversight that you can either implement that and automate that within the process itself, or have flags that can be flagged for human operators to come in and ensure that they can look over that. So I don't think that there is anything out there that shouldn't be touching these innovations and leveraging them to deliver better results. It's really, given anything that you need to deliver, you need to very carefully map out what is the end result and how are you going to deliver that end result, leveraging the tools that you have available to you. And I'd say it's amazing that the information that you can find on on the web today. Like, you can literally be walked through how to do an entire deployment in any field you want, and be able to do that in a matter of hours or days instead of months and years.
Absolutely. I love it. All right. Well, excuse me. I know you got to get back to it. If somebody does have a follow-up question that they want to ask you, or they want to go over with you, what's a good way of getting in touch with you?
I am active on LinkedIn. They're welcome to hit me there. And, of course, DDN has a website, and they can come through our DDN website and be able to communicate with any of us as needed and appropriate.
Awesome. Moiz, I appreciate the time. Thanks for sharing with us.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Absolutely. All right, that's it for this episode. We'll be back again, different guest, different topic. Until then, a few things. One, please share this episode with somebody who also might benefit from listening to it. I think Moiz did a great job of talking to us about operationalizing AI solutions, a little bit of identifying that value. We talked about pilots failing and defining value, delivering and accelerating delivery, and a few other things in there as well. So please share this episode with others. That would be fantastic. Also, like, subscribe, comment, let me know how the show's going for you. Until next time, thank you and goodbye.